Yukong is an imaginary harmony character who can act more like a sub-DPS who can buff the party rather than just a pure buffer. Her kit does of course revolve around her Roaring Bowstrings buff, which increases all party members' attack by a certain percentage for 2 ally turns. When Roaring Bowstrings is active, using her ultimate will also increase all allies' crit rate and crit damage by a certain percentage, and she can actually deal quite a lot of damage herself. She doesn't consume a stack of Roaring Bowstrings when she takes action right after activating it, and the buff from her ultimate activates on cast, so her attacks make use of all her own buffs. Also, her buff's values increase based on her ability levels, not her stats, which is nice because you can always get the full value of her buff regardless of relic substat luck. She can be one of the most complicated units to build and use though, because she can be very stat hungry if you want to maximize her capabilities. She needs pretty much every stat, and her buff can be tricky to work around. So a main concern is how much speed she needs and whether to build her fast or slow. I think this is such an issue because there is no one right answer, and it will depend on how you want to use her and who you're using her with. So I've thought of 3 main speed points that can be tailored to your specific use, and I'm not saying any of these are definitively the best, but are just suggestions. The first one is fast Yukong, making her the fastest member of your team so she always goes first. I think this is especially good if you're running her as a solo support for 2 DPSs, especially erudition or destruction characters, or in a 1 DPS 1 sub DPS setup where you want both of your damage dealers to be buffed. Yukong will activate her buffs, both damage dealers as well as Yukong herself can take advantage of them, and then your sustain will go last, not using a stack of the bowstrings buff. You can also make good use of the action forward effect from the Vonwax set, so she always goes first right from the start of battle. The second way is speed tuning her to your DPS in a more hyper carry oriented team with either another buffer or a debuffer, your DPS unit, except Selah, and a sustain. This way you give Yukong just more speed than the DPS, taking into account if they have any self-speed buffs in their kit like the high units do, so they don't end up in front of her, but just less speed than the other support, so Yukong also gets value from their buffs or debuffs. In this case, you could still use the Vonwax set on her as long as the other support is also using it and have higher speed than her, so they still go before her. Or you can use something like Space Station, Fleet, or even Kingdom of Banditry if you're going for a more break Yukong. And the last way is to make Yukong the slowest member of the team. This is great specifically for Selah, who gives herself so much speed that she'll usually end up always going first, as well as for maximizing Yukong's personal damage. You can trade speed boots for attack boots on Yukong and look for more offensive substats on your relics, and definitely don't use the Vonwax set on her for this one, but an energy rope is still recommended. In this case, her buffs won't be active for the first turn unless you use her technique, so it's active going into battle since she goes last, but each subsequent turn, Selah will always go right after Yukong, so she'll always be buffed. Of course, turn order can always be thrown off by enemies debuffing your speed or crowd control or what have you, but that's always going to be an issue for every team, so just keep that in mind. So I hope this helps. As I said, Yukong can be very tricky to build and use, but this can also work in your favor since it allows her to be flexible enough to adapt to different team comps and different playstyles. Let me know in the comments if and how you've built Yukong. And with that, as always, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos to come, and I will see you next time.